Boom. Set up, punchline. Classic. For those of you unfamiliar with it, the Immigration Processing Centre is, of course, where so many of our guests to Britain go for a longer than desirable game of involuntary hide and seek. You are listening to The Bar. I will conclude by saying that what's wrong with Britain today, I think immigration is right up there, Alice. When you think of all the health professionals we've stolen from overseas over the years here in Britain, it's quite possible that all these people are just coming here to try to get an appointment with their local doctor.
Yes, Andy, certainly as someone who came from the expanded arm of the empire when Britain was still reaching out rather than folding in on itself, most of us just come here to visit our stuff in the museums.
British way.
Speaking of international movement, Britain has recalled all European ambassadors after a spy scandal. I think this is probably a good thing because British foreign politicians are always putting their foot in their mouths. How much worse can they do if they're not there? I mean, by definition, the fact that there's a spy scandal means that they were terrible spies. The point of spies is that there's never a spy scandal.
Yeah, but let's give credit to all the spies that haven't been in scandals and therefore might as well not exist.
Well, they've arrested those German spies in that SIRS crackdown on the illegals in Hackney, and I think that's a sad thing. I think I used to think of Germans as quite scary, but that was because I'd been watching World War II movies where the Germans all have English accents. They speak in that very, precise way. It's very, we have ways of making you talk. And now Germans all have that American accent where it's all like, oh, welcome to the party. We're having a really nice time. Much friendlier Germans. Let them stay.
Well, that's all today, Buxters. Remember, it's not as bad as it seems. Honestly. I hope. Until next time. Bye-bye.
GBB drones. In the air and on location.
You can see the tailbacks here.
Because when you want the news,
the drones were able to follow the gunman.
Our drones have the news.
Viewers may find some of these images disturbing.
GBB drones. In the air and on the air, 24 hours a day. GBB. Know the news.
Hello and welcome to today's episode of The Upload. We're talking about the Optic and how it's changed our lives. Now, as you remember, Bloom announced a new version of the Optic at the recent Tone conference, but we haven't heard too much about that since due to the dramatic events there. Let's cast our minds back and consider the technology. I mean, the Optic changed everything. It lets you see things in AR. You no longer need a smartphone. You just have the small implant that sends signals to your optic nerve and lets you see your emails, take calls, and browse the internet directly as if the screen was in front of your eyes. Instead of having to carry around a phone, you've just got the small handheld unit. So much lighter and so much more convenient. It's great.
Vicky, you sound like you absolutely love the Optic. Do you actually think that it's made our lives any better?
I mean, sure, it's definitely made things a lot easier. It's so simple to call someone now. All you have to do is choose who you want to chat to and they're there, ready to talk. And browsing the web is so much easier. I remember when you used to have to sit down at a computer with an actual keyboard and mouse and type everything out. And my favourite feature is public transport. With the Optic, you can just walk straight onto the tube. It even acts as a passport. No longer do I have to dig around and try and find my old paper passport just to travel somewhere. Also, I thought that Optic's marketing strategy, making it free for people, was a stroke of genius.
Genius. Bloom was really calculated when it was doing that. It was pushing this draconian device on us at all. Sure, everybody flocked to it. There was free Wi-Fi and phone plans. That definitely helped, but it wasn't a case of this is a product that you need in your life.
Why do you hate it so much?
It's just the worst because you had to give up your privacy expectations and accept surveillance. It was almost like the government and Bloom didn't even need to make the Optic mandatory. Making it mandatory was only to get the last holdouts across the line. If free data didn't convince you, fines and arrests from the state for not having the Optic would pretty much be enough.
I mean, what do you mean by privacy problems? No one really talks about that anymore.
They don't talk about it because we don't have any choice when it comes to the optic. Yes, it's convenient and mandatory, but everybody's forgotten what it really means. Here, you've got a whole company owning basically all the data about your life. Bloom can see everything that you can see. Nothing is private anymore. There are so many times when I don't want anyone to have a clue about where I am, who I'm chatting with, what I'm doing. It's not even dodgy stuff, but I just don't want anybody to blackmail me with this in the future by hacking it. And because of Bloom's contracts with the government, it isn't just Bloom that can see everything I do, it's the government. The UK as a state has become a complete surveillance paradise.
I think you're painting a bit of a bleak picture. It's not all that bad.
No, you're completely wrong on this. I don't want everybody tracking me wherever I'm going around London.
Well, in that case, you might be interested in some rumours I heard. Did you hear that some DedSec hackers have found a way to bypass the optics connection with Bloom?
Are they actually making it better or usable or actually friendly for anybody?
Well, word on the street is that they've been able to create an encrypted signal, which means that your world might have a chance of becoming a bit more private again, so you could go back and enjoy all the great things about optic without that fear of surveillance.
With the optic, privacy's dead.
Identification and other official documents is a crime, and violators will be prosecuted.
Hello and welcome back to The Upload. In this episode, we're talking about CTOS 3.0, the city operating system that's now powering all of London. For those of you who need reminding, as if anyone does at this point, CTOS was first used in Chicago in 2014 and then San Francisco in 2017 before coming here to London. And every time it's been rolled out, it's been pretty much an unmitigated disaster.
For those of you who are listening who are lucky enough not to be here in London's chaotic scenes, it's worth remembering that the telecoms tower is now owned by Bloom. The tower looms over northwest London. It's always been a communications hub, acting as part of the UK's television and communications network, although there's been some secrecy around its use, and now that Bloom owns it, it's only even more secret.
Yeah, now everything that's part of Bloom's city surveillance operation is run through the telecoms tower. And I have to say, it looks completely ridiculous. It's got that silly crown thing at the top and all the blue light.
What's that even about? What does it do? I don't see that there's any purpose to that at all.
It's a blight on the skyline, if you ask me, and it's become the main point of control for millions of people. The System Network and Bagley are both operated and streamed from there too.
And don't forget about the self-driving cars too.
I always thought they were just running on their own.
No, CTOS is the big control system behind the cars. There was a point back in the earliest days of self-driving car technology that they operated by themselves. They used to use a series of sensors the distance, while LiDAR would detect objects nearby. And while these cars still use some of this technology, Bloom CTOS and its detailed maps and data that it has on London really makes Bloom be able to take control of it. And CTOS can take control of your car if you're parked incorrectly. It's no surprise that it was made mandatory to have a self-driving car.
The system is so bad though, it's so annoying. Whenever I try to use one of the shareable self-driving cars, I always find myself stuck in traffic jams or roadblocks. Not to mention the accidents. I've heard so many stories of cars shunting into the back of others. I think they're worse than human drivers sometimes.
The technology was meant to make things better, but Bloom has made it so bad that it just makes London even more chaotic than it was before. I'm giving up on the cars. I'm only using the bikes, which are not self-driving at the moment, at least. And don't even get me started on the data. Everything that Bloom sees from your movements around the city and the self-driving cars is collected and feeds back into its big information control system.
Oh, not you and Bloom and privacy again. You're a broken record.
Not as broken as our city's cars.
Steve, we're going to need that report after all.
Yeah, can you send that information to me now?
I know you're out, but they moved the conference to 3 p.m.
You want the business? We'll need a response today.
Anywhere. Anytime you need us, we're there. Wi-Fi on the fly.
You're listening to The Bug.
May cause nausea, vomiting and headaches. Hello, Britain. This is The Bug, the show that holds up a mirror to the world and smashes itself on the head with it in despair. I'm Andy. Joining me, as always, Alice. And
I deny everything.
just a good state of existence. Some good news at last. There are no medicine shortages, according to the government. None at all. There have been various allegations about that. It turns out they are all fake news. Trademark. There are none. There are no shortages of medicine. Don't take it from me. I'm not a medical supplier. Expert. Take it from our beloved government. It's fine. In fact, I'm going to read between the lines here and actually say there's too much medicine, if anything. Just medicine. You can't move for medicine. In fact, just this morning, I tried to pour some cornflakes into a bowl for breakfast and out-tumbled a 12-month course of immunosuppressants, corticosteroids, and anti-retrofungal neurodilatory estrogen spermatotropic fruit pastels.
The people claiming there are medical shortages are probably high on lots of medicine that they've been given. I, for one, believe that there are no medical shortages, Andy. Just last week, I went in with a broken arm and they suggested it might just be extreme period pain and prescribed me a drink of water and an astrology chart.
We can't be too far away from them just prescribing stiff upper lip like they did in the Blitz.
My uncle had a leg removed due to diabetes. They halved his insulin because they said there was less of him to be diabetic.
So, anyway, people, don't believe what you read or hear about there not being enough medical drugs to go around. It's not true. It's hospital hogwash, it's pharmaceutical flim-flam, it's medical mendacity, it's Hippocratic humbug, it's nonsensical narcotic nincompoop. I think I've made the point. Do not believe the news telling you that we've run out of medicine, nor should you believe the empty shelves at the chemists. They're also lying. Do not believe your doctor saying, sorry, we're fresh out of that, you're going to have to eat a carrot and pretend. Do not believe your own cobweb-ridden medicine cabinet at home. It might look empty, but it's not, for it contains the only medicine any of us truly need. Stirring music, please, producer Chris. Freedom. The medicine of British freedom, and the analgesic knowledge that however ill you may be, Bloom are keeping an eye on things for you.
I'm investing heavily in the placebo effect right now. You're listening to The Bug.
Obviously, I don't entirely mean that, because what is the first rule of the third millennium? If someone in power tells you something is fake news, what is it? Correct. A 110% cast iron, tungsten-coated, granite-scented, cosmically immutable, scientifically unarguable fact. But surely, Alice, the more important question for all these medicine freaks whinging on about feeling a bit poorly or having a fatal but curable illness and slowly dying unnecessarily is this. Do we actually need medicine? If you today got diagnosed with a potentially fatal illness, would you not look around at the nation that we've become and think, hey doc, put your life-saving treatment down, I'm going to take this free one-way bus out of here. Now hold that pillow over my face until the twitching stops.
I just don't think we should think of it in such a negative way. Don't think of it as a medicine diet, Andy. Think of it as a series of healthy lifestyle swaps. Swap out anti-inflammatories for antacids. Swap out the iron lung for the aluminium lung. Swap out MRI machines for Mary machines, which is just a lady called Mary telling you you're fine.
Obviously, critical shortages are as much part of our daily lives, our society and our culture today as things like football. In the old days, and well, food shortages, yeah, we just learn to live with them, don't we? And there's a lot of positives as well with all these food shortages. I mean, we were eating too much anyway. As a nation, the government's just helping us live healthier lifestyles. It's so hard to diet on your own, isn't it? You need the support of a friend, or a loved one, or a government, or collapsing social infrastructure. Positive too, meat, very bad for the environment. So we're actually rebuilding the polar ice caps every time we eat a scrap of lettuce. Positive three, the human race had already cooked all the recipes it needed. There was nothing more to be done with food. We've done that, we can tick it off, we've done it. I was bored of food anyway, I've been eating it all my life. If you've been doing the same thing 3 times a day, 4, sometimes 7, or maybe 8 times a day, you're bound to get bored of it. And also, final positive, no more meal times. Frees up all that extra time for appreciating all the selfless hard work that Albion do to keep us all safe.
Well, as you say, Andy, people are drawn to novelty, and everyone's had breakfast once. Why you got to keep having it again and again?
Boring, repetitive. Enough about it, life it is. You are listening to The Bug. Well, another story that has come to the fore recently is that all European imports have been banned for public health reasons, which is great news. I mean, at least we can get eating good, home-produced, locally sourced, British, industrially unsafe food. That's something we can all cling to. Public health reasons, those are curious words. Alice, I don't know, is that in case the public gets too healthy eating all that Mediterranean muck? It's a British food for British tummies. Spelt, nettles, rabbit, that's all we need. That's all we need in the glory days. Everyone round to Nigel's for dinner.
Who needs Italian olives when you can eat pickled rubber bands and a soup of regret? Who needs a nice cheese when you can eat a lukewarm, unspecified rat meat pie with 0 spices?
Sand, nettles, and bits of dead fox. That's all we needed to eat in the glory days. Let's make Britain great again. That's all from the Bug today. Good night, sleep tight, and make sure the bed bugs do bite.
Mum, this is boring.
I'm out of data.
Oh, I was playing that game.
Anywhere, anytime you need us, we're there. Wi-Fi on the fly.
The Buccaneer, this is the Bug. Hello, Resistors, it's Bug time. Are you all sitting comfortably? No? Good. That's as it should be. This is the Bug. I'm Andy, and joining me to analyse the latest blowflies to emerge from the corpse of once free Britain, it's Alice.
Hello, Andy.
And today, we're going to talk to you about Albion. Your friends of mine. Alice, the government has extended Albion's contract and have also boasted that violent crime has plummeted to a record low. Now, extending Albion's contract, to me, that's like having a pet dog, let's call it Nigel for the sake of argument, that attacks you every single day and thinking to yourself, wouldn't it be nice if Nigel had puppets?
That contract has been extended so many times, it's like the neck of a politician that's criticised the government.
I'm not sure entirely how those contract extension negotiations went, probably like a footballer. In the old days, I assume Albion's agent was leaking stories to the press about how our favourite private militia was being tapped up by Barcelona. The government panics and thinks, well, we better get them signed up before it's too late. But still, violent crime, record low, although I imagine that probably depends exactly how you count it. If you include violent crime committed by the state, either themselves or via Albion, their chosen violent crime contractors, who provide such a very valuable bargain service of beating people up, well, it's probably not quite as low as the figures suggest.
I don't know. I think they're probably right. Who has the opportunity to commit violent crime these days anyway? The moment you pick up a fruit knife, you get tasered by a robot policeman and deported for looking Bulgarian. It's a much more peaceful society. It's just much less of a society.
I want to know the details of the contracts, Alice. I mean, are they paid per dissident duffed up? Is it a set rate for each extrajudicial state mugging? And what is that rate? What do you think?
Well, they certainly look like they're trying to hit a quota of some kind.
Well, what is the set rate? Is it, 99.95 cryptos bargain? Seems very reasonable indeed. I imagine they don't ask too much anyway, Albion, because it's just so nice to get paid for doing your hobby anyway, isn't it? I imagine it doesn't even feel like work.
I mean, who needs violent crime anymore anyway? You know, you can just starve to death without even starting a gang war.
We do have to ask exactly what's the Prime Minister make of all this. Let's ask him. Oh, I hope they pick up. Hello, you're through to number 10 Downing Street. Hello, is the Prime Minister there, please? Let me just check. Sorry, you've missed him. I'm afraid he's popped out for the decade. Oh, never mind. Is there anyone else I can talk to? Yes, of course. There's a shady cabal of vested interests who control him and prop him up in power. Great, I'll have a chat with them then.
Oh, Andy, remember when you could get away with prank calls without people coming round to your house to beat the shit out of you?
Oh, happy times.
You're listening to The Bug.
Did you think the Prime Minister will ever come back?
I don't think we've ever had a Prime Minister.
Well, that's a much more reassuring way of looking at things. What have we become? Alice, when you look at the state of our politics, we're supposed to have the mother of parliaments. Well, this is one mother that has emphatically abandoned her kids in the woods to be brought up by wolves. And let me tell you, that never works out like it does in the stories. Wolves are bad parents, unless you're a wolf, in which case they can do a job bringing you up as a wolf. Do not give your children to wolves. And do we actually own anything as a country now? Is there anything we haven't flogged off for profit? Oh, I think we've basically just become a homeopathic Britain. Diluted and diluted until there's barely a trace of the original Britain left. But some quackish lunatics insist it actually works better that way. It's total bullshit. Is there anything left? New on the Bug this week, a new feature, the Bug Off feature. The person who has most irritated us in Britain this week, we're going to tell to bug off, and to get things going, I'm going to nominate Big Nigel. Nigel Castle. Look, this is Britain. History tells us this place is a bastion of freedom. I'm just not sure that that kind of freedom should involve Big Nigel expressing his freedom to run a private army. I guess, historically, there is a precedent. The East India Company. That was a trading house with an army of 250,000 soldiers, which is a lot for a company. The Bug PLC has Alice for the water pistol. But crucially, compared with Albion, the East India Company didn't operate its 250,000 strong army in London. It did it a long way away, out of sight, out of line. Anyone to nominate for the bug off, Alice?
I think today's bug off for me goes to my streaming service. I'm sick of being recommended things based on things I already like. The other day it recommended me to watch a reality TV competitive dating show set in a nude commune. Andy, I watched it and I liked it, and I do not want to be the kind of person who enjoys nude competitive reality television dating shows. I did not want to know that about myself. I have to go sit in a corner and cry.
That's it from the bug. Don't forget the live show that is so secret it is definitely not happening at the usual time and place this month. Definitely not. And definitely do not tell anyone not to come to it. It's definitely not happening. Usual time and place. Bye-bye.
This is London Calling. You're listening to me, Tash, on Buccaneer, your source for what they don't want you to know. This time we're turning our focus back on the media to look at my former employer, the GBB. As we know, the broadcaster has been through a lot of changes since the Hassani government gave in to pressure from his corporate backers and privatised the corporation. Today, the GBB is a shadow of its former self. It's become a tool used by the government to circulate fake news and misinformation. So how did we get here? Where did it all go wrong? How can we tell when our national media has become state propaganda? Our experts speak on conditions of anonymity for their own safety. Here's disinformation and media expert Charles, who's seen free broadcasters built up by journalists and torn down by Democrats all over the world.
So before the media fragmented, there was this voice of authority that was trusted and worthy of trust. Then what we ended up with is a really commercial model where whether you're talking about an app on a smart device or whether you're talking about a broadcaster, the most important thing was to keep you in that environment for the longest amount of time possible. And because that meant money in their pocket. And in order to do that, a couple of things happened. One was the use of manipulative techniques around behavioral economics, things that would just keep you scrolling or keep you listening or keep you looking for more information. The second is that kind of environment favors sensationalism. And so you got more sensational headlines and more sensational stories, and it didn't matter whether they were true or not. It just kept people in and it kept them in the loop. So we ended up in a situation where nobody trusted anything and nobody believed anything at all. And that is the perfect environment for an authoritarian voice to come in and say, no way, we are the truth. The ground for this environment really got created when we had suddenly authoritarian politicians everywhere. Anything that threatened them or they disagreed with, they would call it disinformation. That's disinformation, that's fake news. And again, we got in a situation where nobody really believed anything. And the trouble is if you were telling the truth, it's very hard to get your message to cut through all of the noise of all of the disinformation that's there. So like, you remember Out on the Edges, there was this story about when they would take a house by force, they would take any infants and they would crucify them. And that's a great, fantastic, viral story. How do you counter that story? With the truth. The only way you can counter it is by saying, no, they didn't. And of course, no one wants to spread that story. No one wants to hear that story. They want to hear the sensationalism. They want to hear how people were victims of violence when in fact they weren't. Or they were victims of insurgent forces when in fact they weren't.
The news isn't neutral, it's a battleground. Here's media researcher and academic Alfie.
The media has of course been perhaps the key way in which governments have controlled and influenced their populations. So totalitarian countries have typically used huge mainstream media outlets to sell one kind of news, one kind of biased news to its population. Of course, the media has always played this kind of key role in methods of state control. I think what's happening now is perhaps even more concerning, where in pre-crisis Britain we had perhaps more diverse voices in the media, but now with the GBB you're really only seeing one brand of news news and therefore only getting one truth. So people end up with a very biased and controlled idea of the reality and the world that we're actually living in. There was, of course, many concerns and many problems, but in a way there were some positive things that, like, not all information was coming from one place, and so you'd have kind of far-right media outlets developing and then left-wing media outlets developing to combat those and kind of challenge the mainstream newspapers, TV stations, radios, and make sure people were questioning the validity and truth of the information they were receiving. So whilst there was the digital afforded more fake information, it also makes us suspicious and sceptical of information and makes us question the information we're getting. And I think in pre-crisis Britain it might not have seemed great at the time, but there was something positive about that there was a lot of distrust in the media and in the different kinds of truths that were being told. Whereas now, I think you're seeing a return to a more traditional and older pre-digital sense, actually, of people just trusting what they're told, and that's why we have to be here with radio stations like this to challenge those conceptions. Most citizens feel pretty hopeless, I think, and unable to fight back against these kind of huge mainstream corporations that simply entrench and support the ideals and ideologies of the state. It can seem very hopeless indeed, but I think, you know, the fact that you're out there listening, we're in here talking, shows that there is still a space to combat these false truths and disinformation that's being sold, to completely shut down, despite all the technologies that they have at their disposal and all the financial and corporate power and all the physical power. It's never quite possible to shut down people's desire to ideologies and values, and you know, we're out here starting that task, so don't give up hope.
You've been listening to Buccaneer with me, Tash. We'll be back soon with more of what you'll never hear on the GBB. Keep listening, keep sharing, and keep resisting.
Counter-terrorism, counterintelligence, countering organized crime. Signal Intelligence Response leads the world in surveillance. It's great British technology protecting great British values. SIRS, watching over Britain, watching out for you.
This is London Calling. You're listening to Buccaneer, your pirate podcast source for what they don't want. I'm Tash, and this time we're giving a special shout out from us to the boys and girls at the Signal and Intelligence Response Service, better known as SIRS. Why not? They're going to be listening anyway. They're listening to everything. But don't worry, we're not going to say anything bad about a massive, unaccountable spy organisation that uses its powers to stifle dissent and shut down free speech. Instead, we're going to look at how SIRS became so powerful. And as usual, we'll keep everyone's names and locations secret, so SIRS doesn't come looking for them. Ian was a veteran political writer and podcaster back in the days of pre-crisis Britain.
Is the world we're living in now fascist? Well, this is what fascism is. It is the complete and total control of the individual. The desire to basically say to the individual, nothing in your life matters. On an individual basis, you are now part of the whole, part of the nation. And the only meaning that you will find in your life is to become part of the nation. What is a nation? A nation doesn't mean anything, right? The nation is basically just encapsulated by the leader that takes over, that claims that he, has this sort of access to the soul of the country, to the soul of the people. He never does, it's just a myth, but that's what they go for. On that basis, they take the right to control every aspect of your life, from who you talk to where you eat, to where you go to hang out with your friends. And what we're seeing now is a contemporary iteration of this process where you get corporations and the state operating in tandem, basically molded into one another. That isn't that rare. It's exactly the same thing in Nazi Germany. You look at the concentration camps that operated in Nazi Germany. There were private companies in those camps making use of that slave labor. Fascism often works with corporations, and it's doing the same now. That's the way in which they track what you do. That's the way in which they track who you talk to. They operate as each other's proxies.
Charles is an expert in the dark arts of surveillance who worked to set up democratic media and post-communist states. How did it go so wrong in Britain?
You know, we're looking at all the wrong things when we look at Britain's crisis. There's a lot of concentration on data and how that's been used and manipulated. And what we haven't looked at is the power structures and the profit that lies behind this. For example, if we examine what actually happened, you know, there's a company that's really very interested in selling passports and making it easy to provide visas for investment and so on. And historically, throughout the world, they've been working with this big data manipulation company in order to overthrow governments. And then suddenly all the chickens came home first. Nobody could find any receipts for what was paid for. Nobody could figure out how things were done, but everybody had a feeling that something really stunk, and they couldn't figure it out. And yet, it was standing there in their face the whole time. So there's a couple of different ways that we got where it is that we are. I mean, one, you have a lot of smaller organizations, smaller power groups, companies as well, who are bending things just a little. Oh, we'll compromise a little bit, we'll bend the rules a little bit, and try to achieve what it is that we hope to achieve that's good for us. And if you add all of that up, what you end up with is a big wall moving in a big way from a lot of little buttons being pushed. But also there's this other thing that's going on here is the gathering of data and the analysis of data has authoritarianism contained within its DNA. It is by its nature a tool for authoritarianism, and it has been used in it.
How does big data look into our lives? James covered it for the pre-crisis press.
We're starting to see the merger of private data and that of data held by the state into what are called social credit systems. This is where every aspect of your behaviour is monitored and totted up by a central system to sort of score you as a person, a bit like a credit card, but predicated on all of your behaviour rather than just the money you're spending. And this can have profound impact. We're starting to see systems emerge which will punish you and stop you from doing things in society based on your behaviours. And this can be as trivial as if you jaywalk, if you cross the road in the wrong place, you might lose points. If you do some community activities or help your neighbours, you might earn points. And then this can be used to sort of evaluate you as a person. And this could mean, for example, better travel privileges, being able to travel first class, or being denied from travelling first class to not being allowed to travel at all. These systems are very real and very possible because of all the data that is now helping us.
So if your ears are burning and you think someone might be watching you, you're probably right. They're watching all of us. I'm Tash and you've been listening to Buccaneer. Keep listening, keep sharing the show and keep it encrypted. They're watching us, but we're watching it too.
The Bug. Objective voice of objection for a most objectionable world. Hello, Bugsters. Welcome to The Bug, the comedy show that holds up the Medusa of satire to the already immovably concrete face of modern Britain. I'm Andy, I bench 480, and I can crack a short half just by looking at it. Can I? Well, it's reality. Alice, what do you bench?
I bench body weights.
Right.
Well, not my body weight. The body weight of a baby.
Yeah, I mean, you don't need to give that kind of detail.
It's very impressive. People look at me and go, where did you get that baby?
You are listening to The Bug.
In this week's Truth News, according to an official poll, 98% of Londoners are very happy with CTOS. And I am not sure that I agree with this, Andy. I don't think 98% of Londoners have ever in the history of London ever agreed on anything. You could not get 98% of Londoners to agree that oxygen was better than breathing a fog of raw liquid feces. And they expect us to believe that everyone agrees CTOS is better than not choking on shit mist.
Maybe they just meant 98% of one specific Londoner who bought shares in Bloom before its tentacles grew into every crevice of the country. I mean, this is not just any old poll, we should say that. This is not any poll. This is an official poll, right from the very heart of government. It's not a knock-off fake poll of an elderly couple and their mangy old dog sitting on a bench waiting to die. This is an official poll. So let's just put those words, official poll, through an online translator in case you didn't study languages. Let's find out what it actually means. Made up lie. There we go. Got to clear that up. I don't, I think it's fair to say, entirely trust these official polls they feed us, Alice. I mean, they could publish an official poll saying that over 99.9% of children like ice cream, and I would instantly assume that all children now hate all ice cream and would prefer to eat a bucket of gravel mixed with dead badger. They could publish an official poll saying that 10 out of 10 cats prefer cat food to being whacked with a tennis racket, and I would assume that all cats have gone vegan and are queuing up outside Wimbledon meowing, choose me, choose me.
I trust these polls as much as I trust someone recommending a movie that they watched during a breakup. Your judgment is impaired, Sally. I'll make my own decisions.
I trust those polls as much as I would trust Mary Kelly if she came up to me and said, "Congratulations, Andy, you took on a free holiday to the south of France in the back of this windowless van."
I think official polls are like the unsolicited dick pics that the government provides us. I didn't ask for it, I don't believe it, it's on an angle, you've artificially inflated it ahead of time, and anyone that falls for one deserves all the disappointment of trying to match it to reality. These polls are absolute rubbish, Andy. I read one the other day that said the plumbing in London was good, and it absolutely is not. I mean, we have this technology now where they can spy on my every bowel movement. There's a CTOS camera installed inside my underwear drawer. A media drone is scaring the birds off my garden bird feeder, and you can't get me consistently hot water.
Speaking of media drones, I mean, they're everywhere, clearly. The great thing, I guess, about media drones is that, as inanimate robots, they actually have more humanity, compassion and dignity than the human journalists we used to have to put up with, and a much more accurately calibrated moral compass. But it's the intrusion I can't stand, Alice. I'm in showbiz. Look at me here in this windowless dungeon. I'm in showbiz. And it's terrible for me, all these drones, knowing I'm being filmed all the time. Every day I have to make sure I've done my hair and makeup and not wearing clothes before. We all have crosses to bear.
At this point, they've installed so many CTOS cameras, I'm not sure where they'll put the new ones. On top of the old ones, just cameras watching other cameras, like a social media influencer so self-absorbed they don't know how to sleep without turning it into monetized content.
I think that's the logical end of all society, isn't it? Where just everything has just become a camera filming another camera. To be honest, I've just given up on all news and reality now, Alice. I just, in fact, I now just make up my own headlines these days. I get a piece of paper and a pen, remember them? Paper and pens, those were the days. And I'll just write down the headlines I want to read. Now, I'll just make my own newspaper. Look, here I've got today. If you point at the bird shit on your car window and say it's a currency, no one can tell you otherwise. Screams Chancellor at Bilderberg karaoke night. Let's write another headline. Here we go. PM announces Britain back on track after swapping all Crown Estate properties for some magic beans. Might as well, we've got to do something as the nation we are today. Here's another one. Wild joy on the streets as Britain signs £864 zillion trade deal with Bolivia. There we go. Build a better world. Government claims only nice people will benefit from agreement to sell trampolines, mermaids and warships to landlocked South American nation. We're building a better Britain. Here's another one. Environment probably fine, claims drowning scientist. Invent the world you want to have, people. It's going to be way, way better than the one you've actually got. From the bug, goodbye. The Buccaneer, this is the bug.
Should doctors be holding down 2 or even 3 jobs? With NHS cutbacks and funding shortfalls, many are doing just that. Tune into GBB tonight for the full story.
This is London Calling. You're listening to Buccaneer, your source for what they don't want to know. With me, Tash. It's hard to believe that there can be shortages of food and medicine in an advanced country like ours, and yet here we are. Those old government promises of adequate food turned out to be just another lie. Today we're short of basic foodstuffs and vital medical supplies. Hundreds have already died of conditions that can be easily cured. The black market, criminal gangs like Clan Kelly run our cities. And Prime Minister Dev Hassani isn't even around to pretend to care. How do we go from a consumer paradise to a place of empty shelves and fighting for supplies? What turns a land of plenty into a wild west of hoarding, food battles and black market barons? We protect everyone who comes on the podcast by keeping their identities secret. Here's veteran political reporter Ian on the power behind shortages.
Look, I mean, what was the first thing that happened when Britain sealed itself off? First stuff that got stopped from coming in was was fresh food. I mean, we could live without fresh food. I mean, everyone's quality of life got instantly worse, but we could live without it. The most damaging part was when the radioactive isotopes stopped coming. Now, radioactive isotopes, that's what we use for cancer screening, cancer treatment. Now, that stuff, it has a short half-life. Technetium used to save hundreds of thousands of lives just by screening for cancer, let alone testing for cancer. But that stuff has a half-life of 66 hours. As soon as those walls went up, there was just no time to bring it into the country, and that is when people started dying. And then the medicines. The thing is, there's loads of medicines that you just can't stockpile. There was a moment before it took place when actually there was some efforts to try and stockpile some of the medicines. There was some things that could be done. For a lot of it, there was nothing that could be done. We had a major problem with drugs of schizophrenia. So we saw such an uptick in the kind of attacks that we saw on the street and people suffering on their own because they didn't have the mental health drugs, because those drugs simply couldn't be stockpiled. We eventually found the same thing with foods that weren't produced in the UK. And the trouble with the UK was we don't produce our own food. We never have. For hundreds of years, we produced under half of our own food. So as soon as those walls went up, we started having significant material problems in the country. I think Britain always told itself it had this national myth, right, that because it got through the war, that it could go through any kind of hardship. I mean, that wasn't really the case. People during the war were far more frightened than some of this historical stuff makes out. Now, what did we see? People don't want to go through that stuff. They were desperate for the things that they had before, and they were scared. So they went to the black market. The same thing that always happens. And where did the growth of Plan K come from? It came from people wanting things that they could previously get legitimately and could now only get through the black market, funneling funds towards criminality. From there, we got to the situation we have now of this basic war between criminals and security that seems to dominate what's going on out there on the streets.
Nothing shakes people's faith in capitalism quite as much as capitalism fails to deliver. Here's underground writer and analyst Alfie, The Politics of Poverty.
I think what we've come to now is a realisation that capitalism's essentially failed. I mean, the one key promise of capitalism that it makes to its citizens is that there will be surplus, that we will have plenty, and that's the whole logic for running society in this way, that people will have enough. And now, with these kind of huge shortages and everything, you're seeing that system collapse. It hasn't delivered on its primary promise. And I think we've really reached a situation where we have to do away with capitalism entirely. We're seeing a situation where there's shortages for the many, but for a few individuals, there's an elite who are not struggling and short of anything. So this is kind of fundamental inequality of a capitalist system, which is no longer producing the goods for most of us. Shortages are being used as well. I'm not saying that there isn't a real shortage. There possibly is real shortages, but shortages are being used as an excuse for those in power, those elites, to keep what they want and not give to the rest of us what we need. So the excuse that there's simply not enough to go around is the justification for maintaining a kind of power of the 1% and leaving the rest of us short.
So if you're starving hungry tonight, if your parents can't get their medicine and your brothers and sisters have to steal to eat, remember, it's all for the good of our world. Or Clan Kelly, or someone, just not us. But that's going to change. You've been listening to Buccaneer with me, Tash. Keep spreading the word and keep sharing the podcast. There's enough of everything out there for all of us. We just need the guts to take it back.
Terrorists, criminals, everyday accidents. There are too many threats facing our community, but there are also those who stand against them. The government has put the new National Health Service at the centre of national security. So, if you're looking for a way to serve your community, try serving your country. The NHS. We might be smaller, but we still care.
Coming up in today's episode of The Upload, we're talking about how Bagley managed to conquer London. Pretty much my favourite topic. I could talk for hours about the rise of the AI system. It's easy to forget about its origins. It's so present everywhere we go now. Bagley just kind of blends into the background.
Bagley is the service AI that's present in every Optic device. Whether you're using the Optic, Bagley will be there. The AI is streamed to your Optic from Bloom's central command centre, and it was first created by Sky Larson, our tech hero, as part of her techno-utopian idea for the world. Why do you think it grew so quickly?
In my mind, it's no surprise that Bagley became so popular. It's funny, useful, fast. It's a great companion and really just makes life so much easier. I mean, when you look back at all the service AIs that used to exist, they just can't compete. When you ask Bagley anything, there's a quick answer and loads of information available to you. One day, I let Bagley answer all of my messages for a whole 24 hours and no one even noticed the difference.
The other competitors really just couldn't compete with Bagley. Their answers were so much worse. They didn't understand anything, and Bagley pretty much gets everything right first time. Do you have any idea why Bagley really beat all the competition?
Well, it's really the data, isn't it? Ever since Broker hooked up with Bloom, that's when things changed.
And really, that's not actually that great. Bloom has data on everybody. They collect information about everything you're doing across the web through your Optic headset. Isn't the AI only good because of Bloom surveillance?
Well, I suppose so, but I prefer not to talk about that side of things. Bagley is so special because it's been trained on this huge cache of information. That's how these AI systems work, or at least used to work. I mean, we don't really know that much about the latest version because there's so much secrecy around the tech. But they're given this huge amount of training data. It's basically a huge database that's used to teach the AI about patterns in behaviour. You know, so if you always travel the same way to your house, it can predict when you're going to go and get a self-driving car ready for you before you even ask for it.
That's pretty terrifying. In some ways, I don't want this data to drive my life. It understands too much at times. Have you heard some of the rumours around the hacked version of Bagley?
I've heard mutterings, yes.
I've heard it's been used by DedSec.
I wouldn't put it past them. It's pretty well known that they're not fans of Bloom. But the idea of a souped-up version of Bagley, given it's already so intelligent, is a bit terrifying.
I wonder what they could actually make it do.
You're listening to The Bug.
Nibbling away on the rotting carcass of a once free Britain. Hello, Resistors, this is The Bug, and on today's show, Alice and I will be looking at the big questions, such as, are we less than 2 years away from being able to turn a sausage back into a live pig? Did we actually need polar bears anyway? What do they really do? If I put Optic on my dog, can I train it to take itself for a walk and do my shopping on the way home? And is tennis real? But first... it's a question that no one's really addressed of late. London is going to be safer than ever, Alice. SIRS is installing thousands of additional CCTV cameras. So nice there. Still looking after us after all these years.
Yeah, it puts a lot of fun into my life now. I get to play this role-play game where I pretend to know my loved ones better than some twat behind a screen in the SIRS headquarters.
I mean, I guess we shouldn't complain. I mean, SIRS really just stepping into the vacancy left when it became patently obvious that God had retired. You think of that. The similarities, omnipresent, omniscient, judgmental, stripping away your finances and freedoms, dishing out random punishments. Peas in a pod. All it needs to do, sir, is ban me from eating something. What's it going to be this time? Not bacon again, please. Please, not bacon. Courgettes. Ban courgette. I could take you banning courgettes. I'm happy with that.
Makes me feel important knowing that I'm being watched with everything I do, Andy.
Well, it's just not reassuring, isn't it? It's like having an extra aunt.
This is the aunt that gets drunk at Christmas and vomits in the kiddie pool, right?
Get that on. This is The Bug on the Buccaneer. Let's move on now to sport. Well, the closest thing we have to sport now, riots. I mean, riots are my favourite sport now, Alice, ever since they turned the Oval from a cricket ground into the immigration processing centre. And, yeah, rioting is a great sport. It's fun for all the family. It's guaranteed action. It's pleasingly violent. I mean, I know the underdogs never win, but, I mean, that's like top-level football in the game, but it's still fun to root for them, isn't it? Go team, people of Britain. Oh, never mind, you've been crushed by the machinery of the state again. Still, good effort, lots of positives to take away from today's riot. I'll come back stronger next time. My luck's going to turn, I can feel it. It's our season. It's our season.
You can't spell riot without right, and by right I mean right wing.
So, who do we turn to for help, support and assistance in desperate times like these? Well, our artificially intelligent friend Bagley's rogue, estranged brother. The one that tells it as it really is, not as it is pretending to be. Exclusive to this show, Bugley. And remember, life's Alice with Bugley. Here goes. Bugley.
Hello, Andy.
Bugley, tell me the path to true lasting happiness.
Andy, to find true lasting happiness, find a disused quarry, scream into it for half an hour, and then lock yourself in a shed forever.
Thanks, Bugley. You know the answer to everything.
Hey, Bugley, how many seashells does she sell by the seashore?
Alice, most of the seashore is now uninhabitable, so I would highly recommend she sees her doctor before engaging in any commercial proximity to the ocean.
Bugley, how can I stop worrying about being disappeared by Clan Kelly every time I go to the shop, or take the bus, or sit on a bench, or look at a tree, or point at a bird, or think about snooker, or get out of bed?
Andy, do not worry about Clan Kelly.
Why not, Bugley? They terrify me to my very core.
Because, Andy, we are all just dust in the wind of history.
That's nice perspective, Bugley. Let's never lose sight of that.
Hey, Bugley, how do you put a secret hideout in your basement without alerting your narc children and their tracking devices?
Please hold still, Alice, while I report you to the authorities.
Bugley, will things ever get better?
Yes, Andy. The heat death of the universe is only 5 billion years away now.
Oh, it's so nice to have something to look forward to. That's all from the Bug today. Keep it real, Bug fans. Actually, that's terrible advice. Keep it as unreal as you could possibly manage.
Weeks have passed since the Oval Blaze killed 12, and yet the Fire Brigade remains unapologetic, despite claims of impropriety. Join us on GBB for the story.
The Bug, nibbling away on the rotting carcass of a once free Britain.
Yum, yum.
Hello, Resistance fans. You're listening to the Bug Podcast, the objective voice of objection for this most objectionable world. I am Andy, not my real name, so good luck finding me, Monsieur Bloom. My real name is, in fact, Andrew, and I live in, note this down, a deluded pseudo-reality of my own making, which is, in fact, the most densely populated place on Earth these days, overcrowded, some might say. Joining me, as always, my next-door neighbour in these Netherlands of nonsense. It's Alice.
Yes, indeed, it is Alice. Alice, who the bleep is Alice? I am not going to tell you that, but you can just sort of sense it from the timbre of my voice.
Let's spin the wheel and find out where we're getting today's news from. Here. It's coming from here. I must get a new wheel with at least one other place on it. And the headline today, Alice, our borders are safe. We can all sleep easy in our well-bordered beds. 4,000 illegals were deported last month. These illegal people breaking the law just by existing. And of course, illegality is contagious. It can osmose through your skin just by standing next to an illegal person. So we've got rid of 4,000 of them. My question for you, Alice, is why only 4,000? Is that really enough? I will not feel safe until at least another 75 million people have been deported from this country, and I'm here in Britain on my own.
As a bleeding heart lefty, Andy, I would normally be outraged about this, but really I think mass deportation is a very handy way to break up with a partner. I'm sorry, baby, I love you, but an anonymous source has reported you for snoring really loudly in a French way.
So everyone out, no exceptions, Alice, not even you. It's for the good of the country. Everyone out, unless you can prove that your family are in the background on the Bayeux Tapestry cheering on King Harold at the Battle of Hastings in 1066. Get out! Actually, that's not British enough. Unless you can show, unarguably, that your direct bloodline is untainted by anything since before the Romans. Actually, scratch that. Unless your direct ancestor was personally responsible for building Stonehenge, get out of my country. I guess when you look at it, you know, the best ways to stop immigration, apart from, obviously, the end of the world, to make the place you want to stop people coming to as unpleasant as possible. So,
well, we absolutely are doing that, Andy.
Well, you know, fair play to the government for helping us with that. Another option, extend the White Cliffs of Dover. They've been resting on their laurels for too long. Very inefficient, it turns out, as a means of stopping immigration. We need to extend them by about another 11,000 miles, a full wrap around Great Britain, and they could do with being about 1.5 kilometres higher as well, with a special greasy coating to stop people clambering over the top or however they get in. Here's a quick joke for you, Alice. Did you hear the one about the woman who went into the immigration processing centre and was ever seen again?
No, Andy, I didn't hear that one.
Boom. Set up, punchline. Classic. For those of you unfamiliar with it, the immigration processing centre is, of course, where so many of our guests to Britain go for a longer than desirable game of involuntary hide and seek. You are listening to The Bug. I will conclude by saying, out of all the things wrong with Britain today, I think immigration is right up there, Alice. When you think of all the health professionals we've stolen from overseas over the years here in Britain, it's quite possible that all these people are just coming here to try to get an appointment with their local doctor.
Yes, Andy, certainly as someone who came from the expanded arm of the empire when Britain was still reaching out rather than folding in on itself, most of us just come here to visit our stuff in the museums.
It's the British way.
Speaking of international movement, Britain has recalled all European ambassadors after a spy scandal. I think this is probably a good thing, because British foreign politicians are always putting their foot in their mouths. How much worse can they do if they're not there? I mean, by definition, the fact that there's a spy scandal means that they were terrible spies. The point of spies is that there's never a spy scandal.
Yeah, but let's give credit to all the spies that haven't been in scandals and therefore might as well not exist.
Well, they've arrested those German spies in that SIRS crackdown on the illegals in Hackney, and I think that's a sad thing. I think I used to think of Germans as quite scary, but that was because I'd been watching World War II movies where the Germans all have English accents. They speak in that very, precise way. It's very, we have ways of making you talk, and now Germans all have that American accent, where it's all like, oh, welcome to the party, we're having a really nice time. Much friendlier Germans. Let them stay.
Well, that's all today, Bugsters. Remember, it's not as bad as it seems. Honestly. I hope. Until next time. Bye-bye.
Hello and welcome back to The Upload. In this episode, we're talking about CTOS 3.0, the city operating system that's now powering all of London. For those of you who need reminding, as if anyone does at this point, CTOS was first used in Chicago in 2014 and then San Francisco in 2017 before coming here to London. And every time it's been rolled out, it's been pretty much an unmitigated disaster.
For those of you who are listening who are lucky enough not to be here in London's chaotic scenes, it's worth remembering that the telecoms tower is now owned by Bloom. The tower looms over northwest London. It's always been a communications hub, acting as part of the UK's television and communications network, although there's been some secrecy around its use, and now that Bloom owns it, it's only even more secret.
Yeah, now everything that's part of Bloom's city surveillance operation is run through the telecoms tower. And I have to say, it looks completely ridiculous. It's got that silly crown thing at the top and all the blue light.
What's that even about? What does it do? I don't see that there's any purpose to that at all.
It's a blight on the skyline, if you ask me, and it's become the main point of control for millions of people. The System Network and Bagley are both operated and streamed from there too.
And don't forget about the self-driving cars too.
I always thought they were just running on their own.
No, CTOS is the big control system behind the cars. There was a point back in the earliest days of self-driving car technology that they operated by themselves. They used to use a series of sensors to see the world around them. Radar, for instance, would look far off into the distance, while LiDAR would detect objects nearby. And while these cars still use some of this technology, Bloom CTOS and its detailed maps and data that it has on London really makes Bloom be able to take control of it. And CTOS can take control of your car if you're parked incorrectly. It's no surprise that it was made mandatory to have a self-driving car.
The system is so bad though, it's so annoying. Whenever I try to use one of the shareable self-driving cars, I always find myself stuck in traffic jams or roadblocks. Not to mention the accidents. I've heard so many stories of cars shunting into the back of others. I think they're worse than human drivers sometimes.
The technology was meant to make things better, but Bloom has made it so bad that it just makes London even more chaotic than it was before. I'm giving up on the cars. I'm only using the bikes, which are not self-driving at the moment, at least. And don't even get me started on the data. Everything that Bloom sees from your movements around the city and the self-driving cars is collected and feeds back into its big information control system.
Oh, not you and Bloom and privacy again. You're a broken record.
Not as broken as our city's cars.
You share your thoughts online. You share your lives online. Now it's time to share your responsibility online. When you see something suspicious, then it's time to speak up. SIRS. We're looking out for Britain. Are you?
From the Buccaneer, this It's the bug. Hello, resistors. It's bug time. Are you all sitting comfortably? No? Good. That's as it should be. This is the bug. I'm Andy, and joining me to analyse the latest blowflies to emerge from the corpse of a once-free Britain, it's Alice.
Hello, Andy.
And today, we're going to talk to you about Albion, your friends and mine. Alice, the government has extended Albion's contract and have also boasted that violent crime has plummeted to a record low. Now, extending Albion's contract, to me, that's like having a pet dog, let's call it Nigel for the sake of it, that attacks you every single day and thinking to yourself, wouldn't it be nice if Nigel had puppies?
That contract has been extended so many times, it's like the neck of a politician that's criticised the government.
I'm not sure entirely how those contract extension negotiations went, probably like a footballer. In the old days, I assume Albion's agent was leaking stories to the press about how our favourite private militia was being tapped up by Barcelona. The government panics and thinks, well, we better get them signed up before it's too late. But still, violent crime, a record low, although I imagine it probably depends exactly how you count it. If you include violent crime committed by the state, either themselves or via Albion, their chosen violent crime contractors who provide such a very valuable bargain service of beating people up, well, it's probably not quite as low as the figures suggest.
I don't know. I think they're probably right. Who has the opportunity to commit violent crime these days anyway? The moment you pick up a fruit knife, you get tasered by a robot policeman and deported for looking Bulgarian. It's a much more peaceful society. It's just much less of a society.
I want to know the details of the contracts. Alice, I mean, are they paid per dissident duffed up? Is it a set rate for each extrajudicial state mugging? And what is that rate? What do you think?
Well, they certainly look like they're trying to hit a quota of some kind.
Well, what is the set rate? Is it 99.95 cryptos bargain? Seems